I spent 7 years trying to be good enough for a woman who had already decided I wasn't. Then the day came when my husband had to choose, and he didn't even hesitate. The first time I met Patricia, I wore a blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion and changed out of twice before settling on it. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted her to like me. I understand now that this desire, genuine and uncomplicated as it was the first thing she used. Daniel had told me she was particular. He said it fondly, the way people describe difficult traits in people they love, softening the edges with affection. He said she had strong opinions but a good heart. He said once she decided she liked someone, there was no one more loyal. He said this like it was a promise, like I just needed to get to the other side of her deciding. I believed him. I was 27 and in love, and I believed him. Patricia opened the door of her house in a suburb 40 minutes from our apartment, and she smiled at me warmly and said, "Rachel, finally. Daniel has told me so much about you." She hugged me before I had finished introducing myself. She smelled like a specific expensive perfume, the kind that announces itself. Her house was immaculate. The table was set like a magazine. She had cooked for 3 hours, Daniel told me later, and she mentioned it herself twice during dinner, not complainingly, but in the way of someone establishing what they had done. She asked me questions all through dinner. Thoughtful questions, interested questions, the kind that made you feel seen. Where did I grow up? What did I study? What did I want to do with my career? Did I have a close family? She listened to every answer with her chin in her hand and her eyes on my face. I drove home thinking she was wonderful. I told Daniel his mother was wonderful. He smiled like I had given him a gift. What I did not notice at the dinner table, what I would spend years learning to see in retrospect, was the other layer underneath the warmth. The small things. The way she touched Daniel's arm when I was mid-sentence. The way she redirected questions back to him when my answers went longer than a few sentences. The way she said, at the end of the night, while Daniel was getting our coats, "He is very special, you know. He has always needed someone who really understands him." She said it to me with full warmth, full eye contact, and it was only later, much later, that I understood it had not been a statement about Daniel. It had been a condition. We got engaged 8 months later. I called Patricia to tell her before we announced it publicly because Daniel thought it would mean a lot to her. She cried on the phone. Happy tears, she said. She told me she was so glad Daniel had found someone to love. She told me she had always wanted a daughter. I cried a little too. I thought we were beginning something. The wedding planning began, and Patricia had opinions. This is normal. Mothers of grooms have opinions. I had expected opinions. What I had not expected was the particular way her opinions arrived, not as suggestions but as corrections, delivered with such gentleness and such certainty that by the time you realized you had been overruled, you could not point to the exact moment it happened. The flowers I had chosen were lovely, she said, but had I considered that Daniel had always associated lilies with his grandmother's funeral, and would not that be a difficult association on a wedding day? The venue I had booked was beautiful, but the acoustics were not great for a room that size, and she had heard from a friend that the catering was inconsistent. My dress was stunning, but the neckline might read as too casual for an evening ceremony. She never said no. She never said, "I do not like your choice." She just introduced doubt, carefully, one gentle question at a time. I changed the flowers. I changed the venue. I did not change the dress, but I spent 2 weeks wondering if I should. Daniel thought she was being helpful. When I told him I felt a little steamrolled, he looked genuinely confused. "She is just excited," he said. "She wants everything to be perfect for us." I said, okay. I said I was probably being sensitive. I said that a lot in the early years. I was probably being sensitive. I was probably reading too much into it. She probably did not mean it that way. By year 3, I had said it so many times it had become a reflex, a way of talking myself out of my own perception before I had finished forming it. I did not know then that this was something that could be done to a person deliberately and systematically over time. I just thought I was difficult to please. That Christmas, Patricia gave me a book about being a supportive partner. She wrapped it beautifully and handed it to me with a full smile, and said she had found it so helpful when she was a young wife. Daniel was across the room and did not see my face when I unwrapped it. I thanked her. I put it on a shelf. I did not read it. But I also did not tell Daniel what the gift had felt like, which was the beginning of a habit of not telling him things that would have mattered, because somewhere in the first 3 years I had learned that telling him things about his mother was a conversation I always lost. What I did not know was that Patricia had been telling him things about me for 3 years already. Different things. Her version of things. I found this out in year 4, and it reframed everything I thought had been happening. I found out by accident, the way you find out things in a marriage that have been kept from you with care. Not a dramatic discovery, just a Tuesday evening and a phone left unlocked on a kitchen counter and a notification that appeared before I could look away. I was not snooping. I want to say that clearly because it matters to me. I had picked up Daniel's phone to check the time because my phone was charging in the other room, and his was right there, and the notification came up before I put it back down. It was a text from Patricia, part of a longer thread. The part I saw said, "I just worry she does not appreciate what she has in you. Some women do not know how to be grateful." I stood at the kitchen counter and read that sentence 4 times. Some women do not know how to be grateful. I put the phone back down exactly where it had been. Daniel was in the shower. I went and sat on the couch and I thought about what I had just read and what it implied about what came before it and what came before that. Some women. She had been talking about me to him, characterizing me to him, building a version of me in his mind that I was not present for and could not respond to. I thought about the last 4 years. I thought about the moments Daniel had seemed distant or had pushed back on things I said in ways that felt slightly misaligned with what I was actually saying, like he was responding to a version of the conversation that had a different context than the one I was in. I thought about the times I had felt, dimly, that he had already formed an opinion before I finished speaking. I thought about a book wrapped in beautiful paper about being a supportive partner. When Daniel came out of the shower, I told him what I had seen. I was calm. I was not accusatory. I simply said I had seen the notification and I needed to know what the conversation was about. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said his mother worried about him. He said she sometimes expressed those worries to him. He said I should not read too much into one sentence taken out of context. I asked him what the context was. He said it was nothing specific, that she just sometimes commented on our dynamic. I asked him what she said about our dynamic. He said she thought I could be dismissive of him sometimes. Cold. That I prioritize my own career and friendships over the marriage. I sat with that. I thought about the last 4 years of my life. The dinners I had cooked and the trips I had planned and the Sunday mornings I had spent at her house because it mattered to him. The career I had quietly scaled back because the hours had created friction and I had chosen the marriage. The friendships I had let thin out because maintaining them while also maintaining everything else had been too much. I said, "Daniel, do you believe that?" About me. He said he thought there was some truth to it. I did not cry. I was not at the crying part yet. I was at the part where everything you thought you understood about your own life becomes a question. I asked him how long she had been saying these things. He said she had always cared about his happiness and sometimes shared her observations. Always. The word sat there between us. She had always been doing this. From the beginning, from the blue dress and the dinner and the warmth that felt like welcome but was actually assessment. She had been constructing something in the space between me and my husband since before I knew there was a space. I said, "I need you to understand what I am telling you. Your mother has been building a case against me to you for 4 years, and you have been listening to it." He said, "She is not building a case. She is a mother who loves her son." Those two things were not mutually exclusive. That was what he did not understand. A mother could love her son and still be building a case. Both things could be true at the same time. I did not say this. I could see from his face that he had already decided what this conversation was, that I was the one being unreasonable, that his mother's concern was legitimate, and my objection to it was the thing that needed examining. I said goodnight and I went to bed. I lay in the dark and I thought about the word always, and I understood for the first time that I was not in a marriage that had developed a problem. I was in a marriage that had been shaped from the beginning by a force I had not known to account for. The question was what I was going to do with that understanding. For 3 more years, I tried to fix it from inside. I tried talking to Daniel carefully at intervals in the ways my therapist suggested. I tried building a relationship with Patricia that was independent and genuine. I tried being the version of me that she could not find fault with. None of it worked because I had misdiagnosed the problem. I thought the problem was that she did not know me well enough. The problem was that she knew exactly what she was doing. Year 7, the dinner that changed everything. I need to tell you about the dinner. It was a Sunday in November. We went to Patricia's every other Sunday for dinner, a rhythm that had established itself in year 1 and calcified into expectation by year 3. I had stopped resisting it. Resistance cost more than attendance. That Sunday, Patricia had also invited Daniel's cousin Michael and his wife and their 2 children. A family dinner, she had said. Nothing special, just a nice evening. It was special. I know that now. It was curated. The evening started the way those evenings always started. Patricia in her kitchen, directing the warmth of the room, calling out to Daniel for help with something, greeting the children with the kind of grandmotherly energy that was genuine and generous, and something I had stopped being envious of because envy required energy I had run out of. I helped set the table. I brought wine. I made conversation with Michael's wife, whose name was Jess, and who was easy to talk to in the way that people are when they are not navigating anything complicated. We talked about her kids and a show we had both watched and her job. Normal conversation. I felt briefly like a normal person at a normal family dinner. Then we sat down. Patricia had made a roast and there were too many sides and the table was full and loud in the good way. For the first hour, I thought I had been wrong, that I had spent too long seeing patterns and tonight was just a dinner. Then Patricia said with perfect timing in a brief natural pause in conversation, "Daniel, I was thinking about Thanksgiving. I thought this year we could do it here, all of us, make it a real family occasion." The way she said all of us was pointed without being audible. She meant her family, her definition of it. I said pleasantly, "We were actually planning to go to my parents this year. It is their turn." Patricia smiled. "Of course. I just thought since Rachel's parents are so far, it might be easier to stay local. Long drives with the traffic. My parents were 3 hours away. We had made that drive a dozen times without issue." I said, "We do not mind the drive." She turned to Daniel, not dramatically. Just turned, the way you turn to the person you are actually talking to. "What do you think, sweetheart?" And Daniel said, "Maybe we could do both. Stop at Mom's on the way." Stop at Mom's on the way, as if my parents' house was a rest stop. I did not say anything. I picked up my fork. Jess glanced at me briefly in the way that women glance at each other when they have witnessed something and want to acknowledge it without starting anything. After dinner, Patricia asked Daniel to help her with something in the kitchen, and they were in there for 20 minutes while I sat in the living room with Michael and Jess and the children. I could hear the low sound of their voices, but not the words. When Daniel came back, he was quiet in the specific way he got quiet after conversations with his mother. A certain settled quality, like something had been decided. On the drive home, I asked him what they had talked about. He said nothing, just catching up. I said, 20 minutes is a long catch-up. He said, "Rachel, can we not do this tonight?" I said, "Do what?" He said, "Analyze everything. Assume everything has a hidden meaning." I looked at him. The highway was dark outside the window, and the heater was running, and we were in a car together. And I looked at the man I had married, and I thought about 7 years, and I said very quietly, "Daniel, do you think I am imagining this?" He did not answer immediately. And in that pause, in the 4 or 5 seconds before he said anything, I heard the answer I had not wanted to hear. He said, "I think you have always had a complicated relationship with her, and sometimes that makes you see things that are not there." Always. That word again. I said, "What did she say to you in the kitchen?" Another pause. He said, "She is worried about us. She thinks you have seemed unhappy, and she wonders if it is something she has done." Something she has done. As if the question were about an isolated incident. As if 7 years were a single incident. I said, "And what did you tell her?" He said, "I told her I would talk to you. Not I told her she was wrong. Not I told her our marriage is not her business. I told her I would talk to you." I turned back to the window and did not say anything else for the rest of the drive. That night, lying in the dark, I made a decision. Not to leave. Not yet. But to stop performing the version of myself that was managing everyone's comfort at the expense of my own clarity. I was going to say the true thing plainly once and see what happened. 2 weeks later, I said it. What happened after was the moment that changed everything permanently. I asked Daniel to sit down with me on a Saturday morning. No phones. No distractions. I had thought about what I needed to say for 2 weeks, and I had written notes because I am the kind of person who needs to write things down to say them clearly. I told him everything. Not the accusatory version, not the version full of anger, but the true version. I told him about the book she had given me at Christmas in year 1. I told him about the notification I had seen 4 years ago, and what it had said, and how that had reframed 4 years of moments I had not been able to explain. I told him about the pattern I had watched across 7 years, the way opinions arrived as corrections, the way warmth was used as a mechanism, the way every family dinner left me feeling smaller than when I had arrived. I told him about the Thanksgiving redirect. I told him about the kitchen conversation I had not been part of, and the way he had come back from it already decided. I told him I was not asking him to stop loving his mother. I was asking him to see what was happening. He listened. He was quiet throughout. He let me finish. Then he said, "Rachel, I think you have spent 7 years building a narrative about my mother, and at this point, everything she does gets filtered through it." I looked at him. He said, "She is not a perfect person, but she is not doing what you are describing. She loves you." I said, "She has been talking to you about me for 7 years." He said, "She talks to me about everything. She is my mother." I said, "Has she ever said anything positive about me when she talked to you about everything?" He was quiet. I said, "Tell me one thing. One specific thing she has said about me that was generous and kind and uncomplicated." The silence was long enough that I had my answer before he spoke. He said, "You are asking me to choose." I said, "I am asking you to see?" He said, "They feel like the same thing to me." I sat across from my husband on a Saturday morning in our kitchen, and I heard him tell me, without quite saying it, that the inability to see a problem was not the same as the problem not existing, and that he had decided on my behalf that his version was the correct one. I said, "Daniel, if you cannot acknowledge what has been happening, I do not know how we move forward." He said, "Maybe we need some space to think." Some space. I thought about 7 years of space. All the space I had been making. All the room I had been clearing for everyone else's comfort. I said, "Okay." I went to stay with my friend Lena for 2 weeks. I told her enough that she understood and not so much that I could not walk it back if I needed to. I sat in her guest room on the first night, and I did something I had not done in years. I made a list of the things that had happened. Not feelings, facts. Dates and incidents and specific words said in specific rooms. The list was 3 pages long. I called my therapist the next morning. I had been seeing her intermittently for 2 years. I told her what had happened, the dinner and the Saturday conversation and the specific sentence that was still sitting in my chest. "They feel like the same thing to me." She said, "What do you want, Rachel? Not what is fair. Not what you think you are owed. What do you actually want?" I sat with that question for a long time. What I wanted was the marriage I had thought I was in. The one where my husband and I were a unit, a primary thing, not a satellite orbiting someone else's gravity. I had wanted that for 7 years. I had tried to build it for 7 years. I said, "I want him to choose us." She said, "And if he cannot?" I already knew the answer. I had known it since the Saturday morning, since the silence when I asked for one kind thing his mother had said about me, since they feel like the same thing. If he could not choose us, then us was not what I had believed it was. Daniel called on the 3rd day. He said he had been thinking. He said he loved me. He said he wanted to work on it. He said the word counseling for the first time. I came home, we started counseling. I want to be honest that I had hope. Even then, after everything, I had hope because hope is stubborn, and I had built my life on this marriage and I was not ready to stop. What happened in that counseling room over the next 6 weeks was something I had not expected. And it started when the counselor asked Daniel a question he could not answer. The counselor's name was Dr. Farida. She was soft-spoken and precise, and she had a way of asking questions that sounded gentle and landed like surgery. Daniel had agreed to her specifically because a colleague had recommended her, and he trusted the recommendation, which I noted quietly because it told me something about how he weighted different sources of information. The first 2 sessions were careful, introductory. We each told our version of things, and Dr. Farida listened and did not tip her hand either way. Daniel's version was that I had difficulty with his family of origin and had struggled to integrate into his family culture. My version was 3 pages of facts with dates. In the 3rd session, she asked Daniel about his relationship with his mother. She asked it simply, the way she asked everything, like it was a natural next question. He said they were close. He said she had raised him alone after his father left when he was 9, and they had always been a team. He said she was the most important relationship of his childhood, and she had sacrificed a great deal for him. Dr. Farida asked, "How does that history shape how you respond when Rachel raises concerns about your mother?" Daniel said, "I want to be loyal to her. She earned that." Dr. Farida said, "Is there a version of loyalty to your mother that does not require dismissing Rachel's experience?" The room was very quiet. Daniel said, "I do not think I dismiss her experience." Dr. Farida looked at me. I said, "The list of incidents I shared. In session 1. Is that dismissing my experience?" He said, "I acknowledge those things happened. I just have a different interpretation." She said, "Daniel, when you and your mother disagree with Rachel simultaneously, whose interpretation do you find more credible?" The silence this time was longer. He said, "That is not a fair question." She said, "I know it is uncomfortable. I am asking it anyway." He looked at the wall to the left of her head, and I watched his face, and I saw him trying to find an answer that was honest without being the answer he did not want to give. I had watched him do this for years, this particular internal negotiation, and I had always let him find his way to a softer landing. He said, "My mother has known me my whole life." I said, "I have known you for 9 years." He said, "It is different." Dr. Farida said, "How is it different?" He said, "She knows who I am at my core." I said very quietly, "And I do not." He did not answer. I sat in that chair in that room, and I heard my husband say, without the words, that 9 years of a shared life had not given me the same authority over the truth of him as the woman who had raised him. That his mother's version of me was more credible than my version of myself. That after 9 years, I was still, in the place where it mattered, a guest in the story of his life. Dr. Farida let the silence sit. She was good at that. Then she said, "Daniel, I want to ask you something, and I want you to take your time. If your mother's view of Rachel and Rachel's view of herself are in conflict, what would it take for you to trust Rachel's view?" He thought about it for almost a full minute. He said, "I would need to see it for myself." She said, 7 years of Rachel's experience is not enough." He did not answer. I looked at my hands in my lap. I thought about being 27 in a blue dress wanting his mother to like me. I thought about changed flowers and a book wrapped in beautiful paper and a kitchen conversation I was not part of. I thought about 3 pages of facts with dates. I thought about 7 years. I thought about the word always, how often it had appeared, how it had been used to make everything I noticed seem like a pattern I had created rather than one I had observed. When the session ended, we walked to our separate cars in the parking lot. Daniel said he needed to think. I said okay. He called his mother on the drive home. I know this because when I got home 20 minutes after him, he was still on the phone and he went quiet when I came in and said he would call her back. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed. I thought about Dr. Farida's question and Daniel's answer and the 60 seconds of silence before it. What would it take for you to trust Rachel's view? 7 years was not enough. I did not know what number would have been enough. I was not sure a number existed. I opened my phone and I looked at apartments. I did not make any calls that night. But I looked, and looking was its own kind of answer. The following week, Patricia called me directly. She had not called me directly in years. She said she was worried about Daniel and she thought we should talk, just the two of us, woman to woman. I agreed to meet her. My therapist said I did not have to. I said I know. I wanted to hear what she would say to my face when there was no one else in the room. What she said surprised me, and it did not surprise me at all. We met at a coffee shop near her house on a Wednesday afternoon. Neutral territory, her suggestion, which I noted because neutral territory was still her neighborhood, and her choice of location, and the particular coffee shop where the staff knew her by name and greeted her warmly when we walked in. She was comfortable there. I was not. That was not accidental. She was already seated when I arrived. She had ordered tea. She stood to hug me, and she held the hug a beat longer than necessary, and she smelled like that perfume, the same one from the first night, 9 years ago, the one that announces itself. We sat down. She asked how I was. I said I was okay. She said she was glad I had agreed to meet. She said family was too important to let things fester. I said, "Patricia, what did you want to say to me?" She looked at me for a moment. Something shifted slightly in her expression. Something small, a kind of recalibration. I think she had expected a different version of me, the earlier one, the one that smoothed things over and gave the benefit of the doubt and left her room to operate. She said, "I love my son. I think you know that." I said, "I do." She said, "I have never wanted anything but his happiness." I said, "I believe that too." She said, "I think somewhere along the way things became difficult between us, and I want to understand my part in that." I looked at her across the table. I thought about 7 years. I thought about the book and the flowers and the Thanksgiving redirect and 20 minutes in a kitchen, and they feel like the same thing. I thought about a 3-page list with dates. I said, "Patricia, I think you know your part in it." The warmth stayed on her face, but something behind it went very still. She said, "I may have been overprotective, mothers can be. He is my only child and I worried." I said, "What did you worry about?" She said, "That he would not be chosen well, that someone would not understand his particular needs. He has always been sensitive. He has always needed a certain kind of partnership." I said, "And you decided I was not that partnership." She said, "I decided it was worth watching." There it was, not wrapped in anything. Just sitting on the table between us with the tea and the ambient noise of a coffee shop where the staff knew her name. Worth watching. 7 years of worth watching. I said, and your conclusion? She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, I think you are a good person, Rachel. I think you love him. I am not sure you are right for each other. I said, you have been telling him that for 7 years. She did not deny it. She said, I told him my observations. He is an adult. He made his own choices. I thought about that. He had made his own choices. That was true, and also not the whole truth, and she knew it, and I knew it, and we sat there across a table with that knowledge between us. We met at a coffee shop near her house on a Wednesday afternoon. Neutral territory, her suggestion, which I noted because neutral territory was still her neighborhood, and her choice of location, and the particular coffee shop where the staff knew her by name and greeted her warmly when we walked in. She was comfortable there. I was not. That was not accidental. She was already seated when I arrived. She had ordered tea. She stood to hug me, and she held the hug a beat longer than necessary, and she smelled like that perfume, the same one from the first night, 9 years ago, the one that announces itself. We sat down. She asked how I was. I said I was okay. She said she was glad I had agreed to meet. She said family was too important to let things fester. I said, Patricia, what did you want to say to me? She looked at me for a moment. Something shifted slightly in her expression. Something small, a kind of recalibration. I think she had expected a different version of me, the earlier one, the one that smoothed things over and gave the benefit of the doubt and left her room to operate. She said, I love my son. I think you know that. I said, I do. She said, I have never wanted anything but his happiness. I said, I believe that too. She said, I think somewhere along the way things became difficult between us, and I want to understand my part in that. I looked at her across the table. I thought about 7 years. I thought about the book and the flowers and the Thanksgiving redirect and 20 minutes in a kitchen, and they feel like the same thing. I thought about a 3-page list with dates. I said, Patricia, I think you know your part in it. The warmth stayed on her face, but something behind it went very still. She said, I may have been overprotective, mothers can be. He is my only child and I worried. I said, what did you worry about? She said, that he would not be chosen well, that someone would not understand his particular needs. He has always been sensitive. He has always needed a certain kind of partnership. I said, and you decided I was not that partnership. She said, I decided it was worth watching. There it was, not wrapped in anything. Just sitting on the table between us with the tea and the ambient noise of a coffee shop where the staff knew her name. Worth watching. 7 years of worth watching. I said, and your conclusion? She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, I think you are a good person, Rachel. I think you love him. I am not sure you are right for each other. I said, you have been telling him that for 7 years. She did not deny it. She said, I told him my observations. He is an adult. He made his own choices. I thought about that. He had made his own choices. That was true, and also not the whole truth, and she knew it, and I knew it, and we sat there across a table with that knowledge between us. I said, Patricia, I want to ask you something, and I want you to hear it as a real question, not an accusation. She nodded. I said, was there anything I could have done? Any version of me that would have been enough? The pause before her answer was very small, barely a pause. But I had learned over 7 years to read her small pauses. She said, I am sure there was. She did not say what it was. I nodded. I picked up my coffee. I drank it. The coffee shop went on around us, ordinary and indifferent. I said, I appreciate you meeting me. She said, of course, we are family. I said, we were? I left first. I walked to my car and I sat in it for a few minutes without starting it. The afternoon was gray and cold and the street outside was quiet. I thought about a 27-year-old woman in a blue dress wanting to be liked. I thought about how much of 7 years had been organized around that wanting, how much space it had taken up, how much it had cost. I called Daniel that evening. I told him I had met with his mother. He was quiet in the way that meant he had known. She had told him. I told him I had made a decision. He said, Rachel, please. I said, I am not angry, Daniel. I need you to hear that. I am not doing this from anger. He said, then why? I said, because I have spent 7 years trying to earn a place in your life that should have already been mine. And I am tired. And I think you know somewhere that you cannot give me what I am asking for. Not because you do not love me, but because loving me and choosing me are not the same thing for you. They never have been. He was quiet for a long time. He did not say I was wrong. I filed the paperwork 3 weeks later. The divorce was not contentious. That surprised me and did not surprise me. Daniel was not a fighter. He was, at his core, a man who kept the peace, who smoothed things over, who gave the benefit of the doubt. He had learned all of that, I understood now, from a woman who had used those same qualities in him to shape everything she needed to shape. I did not hate him. That is the truest thing I can say. I was sad for him in a way that I had not expected. A genuine sadness for a man who had been loved by his mother in a way that had made other love smaller by comparison, and who had not been given the tools to see it because seeing it would have required him to see her. I moved into an apartment in March. It had a window in the kitchen that let in good light in the morning, and I stood in that light on the first morning, and I drank my coffee, and I did not think about what Patricia was doing, or what Daniel was feeling, or whether I had been enough. I thought about what I wanted for lunch. It sounds small. It was not small. For 7 years, what I wanted had been the last item on a long list of considerations. Standing in my own kitchen, in my own light, thinking about my own lunch was not small. My therapist said healing from something like this is slow because there is no single wound to point to. It is accumulated. Years of small redirections and quiet corrections, and the particular erosion that happens when someone spends a long time making you doubt your own perception. You do not recover from that in a season. I am recovering in the way that things recover, when they have time and space and are no longer being diminished. Slowly, unevenly, some mornings completely and some mornings not at all. I blocked Patricia's number on a Tuesday afternoon without ceremony. I did not compose a message. I did not need a closing statement. 7 years was already a closing statement. Daniel and I have not spoken since the papers were signed. I do not know what his life looks like now. I know what mine looks like. It looks like a kitchen with good light and a coffee cup that is mine, and a morning that belongs entirely to me. That is enough. For now, that is exactly enough.